Tonight on Revolutionaries.
I think in my own career, I've worked globally, I've worked locally. I was able to run industries and I was able to run technology. I was able to do startups and I was able to scale businesses. You know, that's a lot of things to do in one place.
One technology company has survived and grown through a century of dramatic change. That company is IBM, and its leader is Ginni Rometty. Tonight we talk with IBM's chairman and CEO about the company's storied history and her vision for a challenging future. Major funding for Revolutionaries is provided by the Intel Corporation.
Thank you for being here.
Gosh, I'm glad there are so many retired IBMers, or else there wouldn't be.
We had a good walk. We walked through Revolution, our exhibit earlier, and you met some of those IBMers who were volunteering here.
It was great to see. Yeah, it was great to see. I mean, it speaks a lot to the company and the culture. And every one of them that I met got to tell me a story about, you know, what they did when they worked at IBM. And it sounds the same to this day. Doing something, and I don't mean the same work. Don't. The idea of the really doing something that was important.
You don't have many 1401s still around.
No, none. Pictures.
Yeah,
pictures only. Yes, yeah. Pictures only.
Well, that's terrific. We're so delighted to have you here tonight. And I want to get started just by talking a bit about the very earliest beginnings of your career, because I
noticed you accented that year very loudly.
Which one?
81. Yeah, like it was a long time ago.
I'm class of 80s, so you and I are, okay. You know, we're proud of that. We're proud of being children of the 80s. What was the attraction of computer science for you in particular at that point?
You know, because people have often asked, you know, so many kids today even change their majors, not sure what to do. And I never did change it. I started in computer science and stayed in it from the beginning. And I think what has always attracted me to it has been this idea of problem solving, and that's what engineering represented to me. And I tell every kid, everyone who will listen, you know, it's why I think engineering is such a great discipline for so many people. And I would say you don't have to be an engineer. It doesn't matter, right, what you're going to go do, but it teaches you how to solve problems. And anything you're going to do, you're going to solve problems. And so I hope and I predict that in the next decade, you know, all of our kids will have some sort of STEM education for that reason. But that's what drew me into it. Math, problem solving, kept me in engineering, and good skills to this day.
You've been on the business side of IBM for a good long time, but do you still have a bit of a soft spot in your heart for engineers? Oh,
very much. I mean, I have to watch myself in that I'm able to do this and then I'm able to do that pretty deeply, and so that's a blessing and not a blessing sometimes. So I have very much a soft spot for engineers. I mean, I think that's got a lot to do with making enduring change, right?
You're now talking about three key elements, these solutions that you're talking about, the solution to a problem. There's data, which you talked about. There's the cloud. And then there's mobility, social connections, and the engagement of people. So those are the three legs of the stool that you're really talking about now more and more with IBM. So let's take those in order, why don't we? You've said that you think of data as...
I think of those as three shifts in the industry.
Okay, let's talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think this is an important point, because if I asked everyone here, people would probably agree with that, that there are these three major technology shifts playing themselves out at the same time. The idea of big data and analytics, cloud, and then I'll come back to social and mobile and what I really think. But the three of those together, no, not that I think anything bad. I'll come back to what I think that's good, where that evolves. And the three together, you know, we've talked about in our industry, in my view, is usually this industry always has something new, as evidenced by your museum, right? Always something new happening. But the fact that three all at one time, in the speed, is creating a dynamic that the world hasn't seen before. And I do spend a lot of time with clients, and I always say, look, it's going to reorder my industry, and it's going to reorder yours. And so this is going to change what we do, and it'll change the world. It's this idea of this 3 at once, simultaneously. So those have been the backdrop, and those are the shifts. To me, though, as a company, then you decide what you do with those. So the idea around, you were asking me about big data analytics, for us, I think IBM has a chance. Remember, we're an enterprise company. I'm always clear, know what you are. We are an enterprise company. And it's this idea that you can really be bold enough to say you can transform industries and professions with big data and analytics. And which is why, if I asked everybody, I don't care who you are, does anybody think they need more data? Does anyone? Maybe? Better data, yes, right? And this idea, I said big data analytics, I think it's a natural resource.
That's what you said, the natural resource of the 21st century.
I think it's a natural resource because like natural resources, some natural resources, they're abundant, but they do nothing unless you refine them. Right? That's kind of the analogy, unless you can refine them and do something with them. And I saw a fantastic statistic. Consumers sharing, you were talking about everyone, whether they were going to tweet or share their opinions, that the amount of data consumers share every day is equal to all the written works of man ever created every day. So this idea that there's enough, there is enough. So it's what do you do with it? Now, this is where I believe with those kind of analytics, it will create the difference between winners and losers in every business. If you're in finance, if you're insurance, if you're a bank, if you are a doctor, if you are a hospital, if you are a retailer, I think this will create the basis. And I see it in even how I run my own company, what we do inside. And so that is what I think, all that big data analytics, it will be the basis of competitive advantage. So nothing, though, until you refine it and what's out there.
Well, one of the things that you're working on so hard is helping good decisions be made when they're backed by that kind of analytics that you're talking about. Say more about decision-making analytics and the way that you're looking at this.
Yeah, this to me, this is the really important part of it, and what I think is different. That the amount of information, okay, huge amounts, everybody would say that out there, huge amounts of information, structured, unstructured, meaning videos, blogs, tweets, whatever, anything you've ever had. But it's the range of predictive analytics that can change the world about what you do. And I was telling John, I just finished kind of an around the world sort of trip, and here's another example. So I was in Beijing, and they just finished APEC, the APEC conference, obviously over there. And we played our little role here in that we've had a project going on called Green Horizons, which is the ability taking huge amounts of not just weather data, statistical data, geographic data, to make a long story short, able to predict weather 4 days in advance with an accuracy of a square meter, but 4 days in advance. And if you could do that, of which the team has really done a fantastic job, you could predict what you have to change in traffic and shutting down factories and what to do to reduce the air pollution, as an example, right? And it's really a big issue, those of you that have been there. This is a big issue. And so that, to me, starts to change the world when you're able to do these kinds of things, right? Or on the other complete commercial side, I was thinking, and I'm out on this side of the country, I was thinking about some big retailers who have said, gee, how do I compete with big e-commerce companies out there? And some of them, I think, very interestingly, with big data analytics, they said, you know what, I have 1,500 stores. I can turn these stores into individual warehouses because I have all the analytics to predict what to ship from where at exactly the right time and deliver it within an hour, and take something that you might have thought wasn't a competitive advantage and make it a competitive advantage. So this is what I mean by it'll change the basis. And I think those are just examples, real-time prediction that is beyond, way beyond, because everybody would say they use data already. That is not a new point, right? But way beyond. And this is what led us to all the investment in commercializing of Watson.
Now, you've made Watson into this prediction engine. That's one aspect of it. And you announced Watson to the world in the boldest and most audacious way, which was to have it play Jeopardy!
Yeah.
And win, which it did.
Yeah. Wasn't too sure at the time.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
we were fortunate enough to have Watson, or a version of Watson here for a year.
I have to tell you a funny story, if I may, really funny about this. Watson played Jeopardy on TV 2011, and so my husband was not with me. He's my husband, but he was at a different place. And I always get confused on how to say that. I was there, he wasn't at the meeting with me, or at the air broadcast. And so it was filmed, and there was over 2 nights, right? And so when it was filmed, though, we were there. Those of us that were there, you signed an agreement that you wouldn't tell anyone what happened in between. So first night, and when it airs, he lo and behold, I call him on the way home, and Watson was not quite winning yet at that time. I call him, he says, "I have bet all my friends that thing is going to win." And I'm like, "Well, I didn't tell you to do that." And so he's like, "Does it win?" I said, "You'll have to watch tomorrow." So you're right, it was a very bold point, right, to do it on television, yeah.
And you've evolved it considerably since 2011, which in computing terms is like a light year.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how Watson is working on these predictive capabilities that you're talking about now.
So this is, so that same night, I will tell you, I always remember in the serious side, driving home that night after having watched that film, and I said to my husband, I called him and I said, "You know what? This is going to change the world." And I am absolutely 100% unequivocally convinced that this is going to change, at a minimum, healthcare and many other things. And with that work, and because what Watson, in a word, we got to see again all your eras of computing down here, right? And I'll simplify it way beyond simplification to say that the first sets of computers is when you walked in the room and showed me downstairs abacuses, counted, whole generations of machines that program. To this day, you have to program, tell it what to do. And Watson learns. And in fact, the shortcut of thinking what Watson does is, think if you're asked a question and you could form infinite sort of hypotheses on what is the answer, and then you test them against all the data in the world and statistically look at all the answers to find out then with probability what might be an answer, and then you'd have all the evidence why you believed it. That's, in some essence, the shortcut of what Watson is doing, but very, very fast. And so what we chose to do then, and I tell you, it's gone like gangbusters since, I actually launched a division on Watson this year. And at IBM, we would only launch a major division for really big things. The last time we launched divisions were when we started a services business, right, which is now over $60 billion. So we launched a Watson division, and it's gone down a couple paths. One is big transformation work in healthcare, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about. And I actually brought Watson with to show you some of what he's doing in healthcare. Then things that I would call more repeatable, Watson as an advisor and Watson as a discovery engine. In fact, I think the discovery engine may end up being, if I can say, a killer app idea, because it can discover relationships between people and things that you don't know. And the other one around an advisor, an assistant. So whether it's for wealth management, for your personal banker, your call center, whatever it is, the ability to help and assist. But the third choice we made, in addition, was to open up an ecosystem. So Watson is a cloud service now, and we want, many entrepreneurs, there's 3,000 in line, to go create anything you want. I've seen wellness, fitness, I've seen Chef Watson. I mean, there's countless Watson to help you shop, teaching, tutoring, lesson plans. There's countless ones of these now that are all being developed and trained. He has to be trained. Mm-hmm. That is being trained to go do. So a whole ecosystem around it.
And you've done something really generous tonight, which is you've brought a piece of Watson with you, and you're donating it to the museum. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we did. So this is So what this is this is the original Watson. So the original Watson, think of a room with 12 huge refrigerators in it, okay, if that size kind of thing. That would have been the original Watson back in 2011. Today, he's a cloud service. But if you were to have compared what was that Watson back then, even to today, it'd be like the size of a little mini fridge in your, somebody's dorm room. And what we are donating is one of his 90 brains, the Power 750 engine. That's what you see right there. There were 90 of those that powered the original Watson of Jeopardy of 2011. So we are going to donate one of them to you all. I think it's appropriate. It really is, in our view, the first real instance of cognitive computing.
Now let's talk about something else that I know you feel very passionate about. You mentioned Watson in the medical field.
Yeah.
Talk about what Watson is doing now and what you envision Watson will be doing in medicine in the future.
So we chose, and this is, to me, it does speak to the soul of IBM in a lot of ways. Always there's some grand challenge to work on, and we would all, I think everybody here would agree, healthcare is one of those grand challenges, in not only this country and in the world. And so what we started out with Watson, and we got onto the topic of oncology. But I'll fast forward and tell you all the different players we're working with right now. But it started with Memorial Sloan Kettering, working on the hard cancers, so things like breast cancer, lung cancer. And could you better diagnose and then select treatments? And could you take that even around the world? So Memorial Sloan Kettering was on the hard cancers. MD Anderson was on things like leukemia, some of the blood cancers. Then Mayo Clinic joined in and started working on clinical trials. Cleveland Clinic on could Watson help actually teach doctors in a better way how to do diagnosis? And the list goes on. So since that time, we've been doing the work, and we have just now finished the commercialization with Memorial Sloan Kettering. And can I show it?
Sure.
I brought it, and I thought people might want to see. This is real Watson. This is the real Watson. And what I'm going to show you. Let me just say a couple words before we start clicking through. This is, and it is really what the doctors want. So you're actually seeing the real doctor thing. And 2 weeks ago, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the cancer center, there are many fine cancer centers in this country, but one of the great cancer centers in New York City is who we did this with. And in this case, breast cancer, let me just tell you a little bit about this background here. First of all, those of you that know anything about that horrible disease, 2 million people a year that are diagnosed. You would think, with all the research going in, that incidence and cures are getting better. Instead, 20% higher every year, 14% higher mortality. And that has a lot to do with the developing parts of the world, right, versus the developed markets. So what Watson has been trained on, he is now, I call it ingested. He has learned from, and of course he's had to learn medicine, but he has learned now and ingested all 300 medical journals, every edition they've ever had, 200 textbooks, 12 million pages of training, and then he has been trained now by the best doctors at Memorial Sloan Kettering for years. And he is ready at prime time, and 2 weeks ago we just signed an agreement with Bumrungrad in Thailand. They are the largest private medical facility in Thailand, and they will be rolling this out for 1 million patients for care. And so this is, people who would never have the chance to go to a cancer center. Now, so what Watson does, is what I'm going to show you, so this is what a doctor would do. He would pick a patient, and I was telling John, I don't have my glasses on, so I'm going to assume we can pick a patient there. Pick a patient that he's thinking. You pick the patient, he's going to go pull everything he knows about that patient together, and he's highlighting it for the doctor. So these are all pertinent to this cancer treatment diagnosis. And so the doctor's going to go look through it. He's highlighting some things, ordering them up. I asked, you can pick out more details. Now, mind you, he's had to read all this and interpret it. And I asked the guys to pick and show you here a particular, because I want to show you something I think will jump out to you, what Watson's able to do. There's something called an ejection fracture. Maybe they can click up to it. Anybody a real medical doctor here? Okay, so you're going to keep me honest and see how I do at the end, okay? And if I do well, say so. If not, don't say anything. So this ejection fracture has to do with the blood flow in the heart, and it says a 45%. And so just keep that in mind in this case. So he goes on, you have the rest of your medical information all pulled together in a nice way. The oncologist wanted to look at it. He's asking Watson for the treatment plans. Depending where you are, by law here, they had to do a clinical trial offer first. He offers the clinical trials. Then he says, what kind? And as I recall, chemotherapy, radiation, endocrine therapy, and you're going to ask for what kinds, because there are 800 therapies in clinical trials for cancer, for breast cancer right now. So he's going to ask Watson, what what flavors of these should we go with? Watson is actually calculating, and those green, those are in priority order of his level of confidence of what is the proper treatment for this specific patient with all of those different characteristics. And if you hit the evidence button, which is what a doctor would say, because a doctor is going to make the final determination on treatment. And I think you should see, if I had my glasses on, is that you'll notice there was contradictory information, meaning this kind of treatment, on one hand, if you've had an ejection fracture, you should or shouldn't, and there were other characteristics the patient also had. Watson actually makes the determination as you're a higher risk of heart failure, and therefore you need to have this one versus the others. And so this, to me, is, when I see this, I mean, the odds, that you can help people in ways that you never could before. And I've watched the doctors interact. It's like a collegial, and this is why, and I've had this conversation with Walter Isaacson about this, that this redefines man and machine. This isn't replacing man, and this is augmenting how you and I make decisions, or if you're a doctor in this case, or versus a financial planner or someone else. And I've watched the doctors with it. It's so collegial. It's as if you're talking to just someone who's never forgotten anything. And, which is not, with medical information doubling every 2 years, as my friend at Cleveland Clinic says, I mean, this is impossible, right? And in the treatments, I could go on and on this. I'll stop now. I'm not trying to make everyone a doctor, but I asked my doctor friend, okay?
She's getting a thumbs up.
He said this. Okay. Yeah. You and I both saw.
Right,
You're my
yeah,
witness.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I saw it.
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
you
yeah.
did.
So this is the real Watson at work.
What does it mean? Let's talk about the cloud now. What does it mean to move Watson to the cloud? And I know that's not in this mix that you're talking about, the whole story, but why make that move? And in a larger sense, what are the opportunities or solutions that you're working on with cloud computing?
I think of the cloud, for simple purposes here, is anything as a service. Anything as a service. Our ability, just think what Watson's been trained on, to now be used by many. If you had to do that independently for every different hospital, every different doctor, that's crazy. So it's got a central corpus that's actually trained that then you can add your own information to have some competitive differentiation and the like. So it's a perfect cloud service, right, that you can call on. And that's how this whole ecosystem of entrepreneurs, many of which are out here, building businesses on top of it. But I think this idea, again, back to cloud, when I think of cloud and when I talk to my clients, there's estimates that 90% of new software today, brand new, net new, not enhancements to something someone has, is done in a cloud. But that 70% of it will be hybrid. And John, I think this is, to me, a big future of where this world goes with where does cloud go? Is everything born on a cloud, or what happens to companies that already have existing information? And this word called hybrid is what's going to evolve in cloud. People will pursue cloud for a simple business reason, in its agility. If you're faster, you'll pursue cloud, I think. And so it will allow, for some very, very clear reasons, speed, and that's a big deal. Now, I think you're going to watch the world of cloud evolve like we saw the world evolve in the early beginnings of the internet, which, if you can, you and I were similar in ages, so we were talking about this. You go back in time, sort of back in time then, and there were you might remember browser wars. Oh,
sure.
Right? And they thought, oh, this is it. That's going to own everything. And people are, browsing. And a lot of people said, we said, that's not going to be where this ends. People are going to do real work. And they're going to go connect these things. They're not going to just look at them. They're going to go connect them to their supply chains, manufacturing systems, pricing systems. And that led to a whole industry around something called middleware. I think we see the same thing happening with clients in cloud right now. They'll do some new things here, and then they want to connect it to the assets they have already, and then get something new and additional at that intersection. And that's why I think cloud is going to end up taking that shape, particularly for businesses. It's going to be this hybrid world.
And then where are you zeroing in that opportunity?
To me, that is what we represent, is this understanding of hybrid, secure, and you got to know where the data is at all times. I mean, this is why. So last year, people probably don't think of it. They probably don't think of IBM. Our big data analytics business ended the year at $16 billion, so pretty big size business already, and continued to grow 8% through last quarter. Our cloud business ended last year at almost $4.5 billion, continues to grow at over 50%. And it's big in its own right. But with business, this idea that, and this is why we've dedicated another $1 billion to opening 40 cloud centers in the world, and they're not picked randomly. They're picked where the money centers are and regulations are, because it's not only having to keep data certain places, and then the ability to audit, secure it, know where it is at all moments in time, what's shared, what isn't. And so there are different requirements of what you need. And for healthcare, by the way, HIPAA compliant and all sorts of things that you've got to have in that world. So to me, that's our world, this hybrid world of the cloud, how to make more out of what you have and how to connect it with the new.
And I want to link that up to the third thing that you talked about, which is mobility and engagement, because you made the point, which is so true. All of these things are changing at the same time at an incredibly rapid pace.
Okay, so.
And any one of them is an opportunity, but you're trying to reach out and grab all three and bring them together.
Yeah, but yes, we are, and bring all three together. But I always say, for us, and the role I see us playing, social, mobile, leads to what you said, the word engagement. So I would say our strategy is about what it enables is one-to-one engagement, whether that is machine to machine or people to machine, one-to-one, and it will personalize things. And it'll be about simplification and personalization. But I want to put a real big but. It will be underscored and it will hang in the balance of security, privacy and security. So this topic is really a serious thing, and not only for individuals, all of us as individual consumers, but as a business, right? Your brand, that is your whole value. And so I always say social mobile underscored by security, because people say, why do you talk about security in the same topic? And I say, look, people make choices between, we all do, between our privacy and convenience and security and freedom. Those things are always like you're going, depending on what country you live in or what decision you're making, you're doing this. And so we're going to take steps forward and backward, as we have seen on this topic. But the social and mobile, they have the wonderful opportunity. I use them internally inside in an enterprise context. I think they'll be the production engines of the future. This has got a lot to do with the partnership we have with Apple. They'll be a production engine of the future, but it will be underscored in a secure private world.
I want to talk about Apple and Twitter in just a second, but let's stay on this topic of balancing of security and other things that you're talking about. It's one of the hottest topics in all conversations now, at the policy level, at the business level, at the individual privacy level. How, when you're a company, when you're running a company that can have such influence in this area, how do you talk to people about where this balance gets struck and how it gets struck?
You know, it's everywhere you go. And I think you made a comment there about policy. So I think all of us can have influence on the policy decisions around this, because frankly, over-regulating this, it is not good for many dimensions. The heart of regulation needs to be on letting people opt in with what they want to do with this information, right? And so as to a company, I would say, you know, it's such a competitive advantage if you're clear with your customers about what the information, what you get and receive. Right? If I give you this information, I get something in return, and you're clear about it. Because many people, they will give up for something. You do it all the time on your mobile phone. You'll give up your location because then you'll get directions somewhere. I mean, so you make these choices almost subconsciously now. And so I think from a policy position, I would err on the side of little regulation, both for letting the consumer decide, opt in and out, but also on the security side, the tighter we regulate, actually the more at risk we are. Because all regulation does is, while everybody's going to be busy complying with regulation, the bad guy's going to go, hey, that's great, you focus over there and I'm going to go over here. So I think this idea about regulation's one, and then I think there's many things that companies can do. I mean, kind of, you know, sort of some golden rules that you can do to be better protected, and it's changing. And perhaps the biggest thing, you probably won't be surprised I would say this, but the biggest thing I would say on security is you have to think of a different metaphor for security. In not so distant past, current, I think most people think about, when it comes to computing and technology, they think of security as if you had a castle and you have a moat around it, You know, that's how or your house alarm, and you have an alarm on your doors and your windows. Many companies have like a different alarm company doing every door and window, which is even worse, but that's kind of the current sort of thinking. I really believe, and we believe, and have invested in this, we've got a whole security division on it, that it is a big data analytics problem. That it's more like your body in an immune system, that you have to accept the fact that there are germs inside. And that, you know, because we all have germs inside, right? And if you think of it, a cyber attack typically goes unrecognized for 8 months in a company. Or 500 million personal records were compromised just last year. So if you think that way, like your immune system works, when you have something bad in your body, when it gets bad enough, right, your immune system goes to it, cuts it off, stops it from getting worse. And that's where I think the future of security is. It's a big data analytics problem that you are going to look for little footprints in the sand way ahead of time to look for things that are abnormal. And that's what I think the real state of the art's going to be.
Before we leave this area and we talk a little more about these transformational relationships with Apple and Twitter and others, let's talk about what you're doing in computing that emulates the brain, begins to mimic the brain, is really approaching that sort of brain science level of computer science. Talk about that and what the ultimate destination is
so this is, I was mentioning yesterday when I'd done my one of my reviews with IBM Research, because it's out here in our lab out here, that they've worked on this for a good decade, and the synapse. In fact, there is a whole language with it, and it's the idea of neurons, how they would, you know, synapses in your brain and how your brain works in the multiple states, and, you know, our brains and what they're able to do with such little power, like tens of little watts of power versus, you know, megawatts of what happens. And that's the real issue, is the power. And, but they have developed something that pretty well mimics that. And what it would allow you to do, I think a simple example maybe, the state of this is that today, if you have an image, you can do image recognition and maybe you'll see faces. Now, but what if instead what you're able to recognize real time is, this is a car, it's moving. In fact, I can see all the cars, and all of them are moving, and I recognize who they are. It's what your brain's doing on a regular basis. And I think we're going to get to that state not very far away from now. This whole idea of, we call it the synapse, right? That form of computing, which is brain-inspired in the way that it works. So that's a wave that we are just really beginning. So we'll be donating that one day soon. Not soon, not that.
Can't wait. Why is it? Let's talk about the transformational part. This is sort of the third subject area I want to talk to you about. Why did you choose to use the word transformation when you first? It wasn't the first thing you said when you came into IBM, but it wasn't long after that. You were saying, you know, this is going to be a transformation, and you really started saying that and pushing for it. Why?
You know, it goes back to what I said when you asked me about looking at that history, right? This idea that this company exists, it's 103 because it is reinvented. And I say we're doing what we must do to reinvent this company. And I think it's clear because if you go back in time, every generation gets its chance. I go back when Lou Gerstner joined IBM, it was e-business. It didn't start there. He transformed around e-business. During the last decade, Sam Worley worked on globalization and what we changed around that. And now we'll get our chance of transforming what this company does around data, cloud, and engagement, right? These three things together and what it becomes. And it will be a different company one more time, again. Now, there will be many things we do, a good number that we do, I say that will be the same. I mean, I am really proud of the fact, and a lot of those IBMers I met, I mean, IBM runs 90% of the banks in the world, 80% of the airlines, 70% of enterprises' most valuable data comes through us. And I consider us very humble about that, and no apologies for it. And I consider that we're entrusted with something really meaningful to people, and we will continue to do that. And then these new areas as we help those same clients transform. So we'll transform in those new areas, and we will place big bets like we have for the long term. Things like around Watson, Africa, I consider those really long-term, you know, bets that'll be here for a very long time to go. And that's how you live to be 105. I mean, you make these sets of decisions and you stay with them, right? And so I'm proud of the IBMers. I mean, changing one more time. You were saying that to me as we went through, that you couldn't believe how many times we kind of became something else.
Well, and you use this great analogy of the cargo ship that you see on the horizon, and it doesn't look like it's moving, and it doesn't necessarily look like it's turning, but
don't
when you
ever
get up close to it,
us.
yeah.
I said, don't. I said it does. I said sometimes it reminds me, if you've ever been on a ship or you're on shore and you're looking at a ship out there and you think, God, that thing is not moving, and then you go to bed and you wake up the next day and all of a sudden it's like right at your face. And so that's a bit when you move a big ship. And then you wake up and you look, and it's moved.
Yeah.
So it's a big company in a lot of countries, and in a lot of work that we do for clients, right?
So Apple, Tim Cook said that the goal of this partnership, and this is his quote, is to turn Apple devices into mobile decision-making tools. Now, maybe that's the whole story. I suspect that's not necessarily the whole story, but talk about this pretty conversation-sparking announcement that IBM and Apple are suddenly getting together, and you and he were talking about doing big things.
Yeah, this is, to me, this is a great example of a wonderful partnership. But there are a series of these. We announced Apple and mobility, which, if I had to give it a tagline, this is about reimagining how work could be done. We announced one with Twitter, which is all about you could improve every decision with the voice of a customer. And I'll describe a little bit about what those do. SAP is putting their entire cloud portfolio on ours. And then one you might not have paid as much attention to is we are also the foundation for Tencent in Japan, in China. And Tencent is WeChat. It's the Twitter of China. So this thing in fact, Tim and I were today reviewing some of the work, and they've done great work together. It is a perfectly complementary partnership. And when we say reimagine work, I go back to some really fundamental statistics. I mean, everybody, and if you work for a company, all of us would have smartphones. But the statistics say that 60% are used for email and calendaring, and in a company, 70% don't use them for more reimagining work because of still concerns about management and security of the devices. And so this is what kind of led with Apple being really world-class. I think everybody would say that for consumability, of elegance of design. And then we have done this work all around, as I said, this hybrid world. How do you make these things connect into the systems of the world to really change how work can be done? So the first 12 apps are coming out now. And as an example, one of them would be a flight attendant. So I don't know how many fly recently, or if you've ever been on a delayed flight, right? What happens when you're on a delayed flight?
You go crazy.
Okay, then next, and then who do you share that pleasure with?
Yeah, you're letting everybody know.
Okay,
I'm running late, and I'm.
And then you
upset about it.
Yes. Okay.
You're trying to change hotel reservations or car rental information or all of that.
Yes. So you take you're already, I could tell you get pent up about this. So what everyone does is,
Is anybody mellow about this? I don't know.
Nobody. So, or how often then do you get to the counter to rebook the flight, and and they're doing this for like 15 minutes, and you're like, what are you doing? All that time.
Yeah.
And so so one of the first ones is, now it's going to sound easy, it's hard to do, is for a flight attendant, why not when you're in the air, your connection's late, why can't someone walk up to you and say, Mr. John, here are your 3 options. We're going to be 30 minutes late. Which one would you like? Boom. And I've rebooked you. And then you're not, like everybody is, calling 8 different people to try to book you 5 different reservations under different names so you can, hold them all at the same time, and everything else that everyone does. So this is one of them, as an example, is this kind of an app. I just saw another one today, public safety, that looks fantastic. And so that was the idea. And now to do that, you need great simplicity, because a flight attendant is not going to stand there and go through 15 different screens with you. They're going to have to do it in a very simple way, and we've got to connect it on through to those systems to make that be able to happen that way, and do it in a secure, managed, end-to-end way. So the client response has been phenomenal on this, so that's when you are at what a problem is at this point.
And these are Apple devices. It's envisioned that flight attendants
Yeah.
will be walking up and down with an iPad or
whatever.
6 Plus
That's right. That's right. And so that's what we'll start with those devices. We'll do them first, obviously, and working with the Apple design team, and then, obviously, clients sometimes have multiple kinds of devices, and you'll be able to roll these things out to others too.
So Twitter. Did people scratch their heads a little bit around IBM when they heard we're doing a deal with Twitter? Was
No.
it really clear what that was all about? Oh,
Yes.
that's good.
No. I don't think so at all. I mean, did most people hear about the Apple one? Would that be a fair audience participation? Yes. Okay. Twitter? Yes. Okay. Yes and no. I mean, the Twitter. Dick and I had talked about this. Most clients, again, enterprise. I'm thinking enterprise. 500 million tweets a day in the world, 500 million, right? So that's a lot. And the idea about a time series of data, and it's so rich, you want to do something with it, but try to take that information, every retailer's dream, you name it, and then get it in a way you can really deal with it. And so this is what the partnership with Twitter is all about. We are actually feeding then our products, Watson Analytics, which is a ability to do analytics in the palm of your hand. You get any good ones there?
Oh,
Should
yeah.
I keep talking?
No, keep
going while you're
keep
sorting?
going. No.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't mind me.
These are long ones I can see over there. So the idea with Twitter is then to be able to take that into whether it's pricing decisions, retailing decisions, employment decisions, or trending decisions, you name it, and make it in a consumable fashion for companies to use. And so we're pretty excited. And again, it's an idea that I think most clients are pretty excited about as a way to cross this over. But John, I would, as you are finishing your sort.
Keep going.
You're enjoying these.
I am.
Yeah. So as you would finish your sort, a takeaway on these partnerships. To me, what they prove is, it's when you said, what are we? We are an enterprise platform. When you want to deal with the enterprise, we understand the enterprise better than anybody. And these are all instantiations of becoming the enterprise platform for analytics, the enterprise platform for mobile, the enterprise platform for what you go do in the social world. In fact, today, we did announce, we had another big announcement. We're the #2 email platform and office platform in the enterprise. And what we announced today is, really, it's called Verse is its name, but what it is it's an integration of social analytics, and it's, in other words, manage your work, not your inbox. Manage your work, not your email. And it's all analytic, knows you, connects to Watson, it organizes your work. It's that kind of idea. But again, it's security, knows who should be looking at what, who shouldn't, all driven from an enterprise context.
Let's talk about Africa for a minute too, because you are spending a fair amount of time there. There's a major research and development center in Nairobi.
Yep.
You've got a real commitment to IBM's work there and a lot of this social problem solving that you're talking about. Can you talk about what's going on over there and the opportunity?
How many people, just give me a sense, how many people believe Africa is a big opportunity for, if you, okay, I've got a lot of fellow believers here too. This is, and I always, years ago, when I was focusing more and more on Africa and sort of fell in love with it, I bet a decade ago, I had done something, we were doing global innovation outlooks, and I'd done one on Africa, and the 8 reasons why Africa would really evolve. I fast forward, and whenever I'm in Africa, I always say, so my early, later on time, I always say, yeah, all of them. And so today, in Africa, there's 3 reasons I believe so strongly. Now, we've been in parts of Africa since 1937, so this is not as if the continent is new, right? But 54 countries are there. We're now in 24 of those countries, and for the 3 reasons. One is urbanization, and what that, and all you have to know is already 52 cities over 1 million people, and already 400 companies bigger than $1 billion in size, right? Second thing is talent. By 2040, Africa will have a greater ability to produce a high-performing workforce than India and China together. And then the third reason I find most interesting is I think Africa will leapfrog, meaning because, that old saying, motherhood or necessity is the
mother of invention.
Mother of invention. Yes, I'm in an invention place. Yes,
Right, yes.
yes. Necessity is the mother of invention. And I see this already happening, right? We are going to find what some people might call good enough solutions that will come back into the developed markets. And one of them, my favorite one I saw out of our research lab. So you guys have terrible traffic here, right? Would you agree? Yeah, yeah, that's a resounding. And as do many cities. And there's often tax referendums to put in all sorts of traffic management and monitoring, et cetera, hundreds of millions of dollars. So in Nairobi, there were, I want to say it was 9 really poor quality digital cameras that are located around the traffic. And the guy said, look, we don't put any more infrastructure in. We think we could predict where all the cars are going to go. We don't need to know. We don't need to know anything else. And they're darn close enough. And so it's two ends of a spectrum on the ability of what to do. And same is true for healthcare, which is why it is the first place we took Watson outside the United States. And it was to go, you have one caregiver for 10,000 people there. So this idea that you will leapfrog and come up with ideas is huge. And in fact, we were the first company to open a real full-fledged research organization in Nairobi, Kenya. I always knew there would be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And obviously things did happen in Kenya. But that has been a great thing. And it's the idea of what I think is a trend for research. The problems of the world are so big, you are going to have to move the research to the problem. You can't move the problem to the research, right? And so that's a bit. But now we do a lot of commercial work there too. So it's not meant to just be altruistic. There are real business reasons to be there. That urbanization and those companies, that's all opportunity. The talent, I want my fair share of the talent. And then as well, this idea that you are going to have these leapfrog solutions that are out there. Now, we have, though, on the other hand, just back to the idea with social and all, we've been doing work with analytics on Ebola in Sierra Leone, and the idea being, could we analyze all of the public chatter out there to be able to direct public safety? Which parts of the country and cities did people not have the education on how to protect themselves? And that's what we've been doing. It's a great example of deep analytics against this, and then to take selected amount of public safety and direct it in the right areas.
We're getting the audience questions now. You've been at IBM for 30 plus
For a while.
years. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks,
and the question here is,
why do you look so young?
What career advice? Close. That's actually here, yes. How did you manage to stay so youthful?
No.
What career advice do you give to young professionals who are currently shifting careers every 3 to 5 years, or maybe doing that right now?
That what I say to them, and one of the things when people ask me about, because maybe we're unusual now to have stayed someplace, right, for a long time. And I think a company earns its right for you to stay there, right? And you don't need to make a decision now forever. It's, are you learning and growing? And if you are, stay. And it's a two-way street. And you make that decision with each time and what project that you work on. But because I think in my own career, when people say, well, geez, but I think, boy, I've worked globally, I've worked locally. I was able to run industries, and I was able to run technology. I was able to do startups, and I was able to scale businesses. That's a lot of things to do in one place. And you have the benefit of a network that you know already to be able to keep doing those things, right? So to me, I feel like I've had tens of careers in one place. And that's why I think most kids come to IBM. It's a chance to have that access and change things that really matter to this world in the long run. And so that's why I tell them to come, and you can have many careers inside of that and many chances that you'll get to do that.
Can you find enough qualified engineers to meet the demand now? And if not, what are you going to do?
I would just make a statement about sort of playing back on this topic of education being one of the most important topics in our country, and that I think business can do a lot to help on this topic. And there are not enough engineers. There's no doubt that there is not enough engineers. But what we've started, and there will now by the end of next year be 100 of these schools. They're called Pathways to Technology. And we adopted the first ones, but now other companies have. It started with taking a high school the worst performing high school in Brooklyn, and it's now no longer that, a 6-year school. So think of it as a 6-year program where the kids come out with an associate degree, but they come out trained that we would hire them for entry-level technology positions, right of first refusal on a job, we assign mentors, we do give the schools the curriculum, but these are kids that were at a 50% attendance rate. These kids are 98%. They are now, I mean, it is a wonderful thing. These are the same kids that with direction like this. And so we started, New York's now rolled out one in every county. Connecticut's going, there's 4 more states. It was very nice President Obama put it in the State of the Union, and now there are many of both our other companies in the tech industry and otherwise that are adopting these schools. You give them the curriculum, give them the mentors, and this idea that you come out with, and I think we may end up that way, a 6-year, is 4 years really enough in this day and age for the kind of skills kids are going to have to keep progressing this country? You'd say no. I mean, certainly we'd all say university, but at a minimum, right? And there are many vocational schools in this country that dropout rate is even higher. And so this takes and puts that to good use. So that is a topic. There's not enough, but I really believe this is another one that is very solvable with pragmatic actions.
Mm-hmm. You said at the recent IBM Think Forum
what did I say?
that you said growth and comfort don't coexist. And that's true for companies and nations and even people. Why is that important to you, and why did you choose to say that about where you are and where the company is at this point in time?
I feel strongly about this. If you ever, if I ever asked you, when did you learn the most in your life? Just shut your eyes. Don't you fall asleep, but if you're not already sleeping. But if I asked you, when did you learn the most? I would bet you will tell me it's when you were at risk. That you went and did something you didn't know how, or someone just dropped you in and put you in a situation, and that's when you learn the most, right? And I think it is a wonderful lesson I was able to learn early, this idea that growth and comfort will never coexist. And I do believe it's true for countries, and when you watch countries go through, as they come through and develop, I know it is true for companies. And I say it to my own team as we continue to transform. I said, only revisionist history is clear. Only revisionist history, not as you go through. And then for people, it's really something every young person developing, and I say that, and it's amazing how many people that strikes a chord with, right? And I thought about it even today as I was flying over, and I had my little nephew's in college, and I know he's struggling a little bit. And I just sent him a text. I said, "How are you?" I won't say his name just in case. And he says, "Oh, I'm okay." I said, and I don't know why at the moment I said, growth and comfort never exist. I said, it's true for kids too in college, And he said, I got back this answer, "I can't wait to see you. I understand,"
Yeah.
And I think that applies, and no matter whether it's your kids, your profession, your company, and once you know that, you will feel very confident about being ill at ease. And I think that gives you great courage to make decisions and to know that it's okay at times to not be certain and go through it. And that's why I think that is probably the most valuable advice I ever learned and the most valuable advice I'd give someone.
Well, after tonight, we'll all be looking on with great interest at what you're doing and the path that you're breaking. Ginni, you've been very generous with your time. Thanks so much.
It's my pleasure.
Delighted to have you here. Please join me in thanking Ginni Rometty.
Ginni Rometty started as a staff engineer in 1982 and worked her way up to the pinnacle of IBM's leadership. There are hundreds of stories like this at the Computer History Museum. Join us next time for the Computer History Museum presents Revolutionaries.